The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not no sound. Crystal Lake still had wind in the pines, distant bird calls, the soft shuffle of people's footsteps on dirt trails. But the kind of quiet that feels like the world finally stopped talking over you. I was already at the lake, thanks to my friend from Ohio. Already breathing that cold, pine-clean air like it might fix something in me. The water sat dark and glassy beneath the trees, reflecting the sky so perfectly it looked like a second world you could fall into if you stepped too far. A few fishermen stood spaced out along the shore, patient as statues. Somewhere across the water, a couple of kids laughed, their voices echoing thinly and then vanishing into the forest. I walked with my hands shoved in my jacket pockets, trying to look as normal as possible. That was my best trick back then, blending in. If you looked like you knew where you were going, people didn't ask questions. If you kept your face calm, they didn't look too closely at your eyes. If you moved like you'd been somewhere 100 times before, no one guessed you were 15 and carrying everything you owned in a bag that was too light to be your whole life. I followed the edge of the lake, sneakers crunching over needles and gravel, and I told myself the same thing I'd been telling myself since morning. Just see how it goes. See what pops. If nothing, head back down the mountain. I said it like it was a normal decision, like I was the kind of girl who took weekend trips. Like I wasn't just trying to find something, just trying to stay moving. I had been there for almost a week, arriving with no plan for food or sleeping. As for food, my Ohio friend had helped with that, but at this point, the packaged stuff was gone. And as for sleep, I had a vague idea that I could walk trails until I was too tired, then find a spot tucked behind a tree line and curl up like an animal. It's not like I hadn't done that before, but the mountain air had already taught me something important. Up here, the cold didn't care how brave you were. I circled past a small boat tied up on the shore and a cluster of picnic tables. Someone had left behind a paper plate with crumbs on it. My stomach tightened at the sight. Hunger always made everything feel sharper, more urgent. I kept walking anyway, because staring at scraps felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. That's when I saw the store. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy. It was built from logs and looked like it had been there forever, like the mountain had grown it the way it grew pine trees. Slow, stubborn, built to last. A faded sign, General Store, hung above the large open window with a counter and seats scattered across. There were clusters of little souvenirs and fishing gear and handwritten notices stabbed to a corkboard. The bell over the door was the kind you hear in old movies. Bright, cheerful, a sound that belonged to a world where people bought sandwiches and bait and didn't worry about where they'd sleep that night. I stepped inside. The warmth hit me first, then the smells. Coffee, old wood, and something savory like jerky that was making my mouth water like rain. The place was cramped but organized, packed with shelves full of canned food, crackers, chips, sunscreen, flashlights, hooks and line, and postcards. I could see a counter with sandwich makings, and there was a cooler humming in the corner. A rack of t-shirts hung from one side of the store that said Crystal Lake, in case anyone wanted proof they'd been there. Behind the counter stood a man in a flannel shirt. Mid-30s, maybe. Short beard, little gray at the edges. The kind of face that looks weathered in a calm way, not in a hard way. Like someone who had spent more time outside than inside. He looked up from what he was doing and paused when he saw me. Not the suspicious kind of pause, just the noticing kind. "Well, hey there," he said, voice easy. "You get up here early? You been wandering around a while?" His tone wasn't sharp, not demanding, just normal. I swallowed. My instincts kicked in automatically like they always did around adults. Quick scan. Exit behind me. Hands visible. Distance. He didn't move from behind the counter, didn't lean forward, didn't try to crowd my space. He just waited like he'd dealt with plenty of people who needed a second before they spoke. "I've been walking around," I said carefully. He nodded like that explained everything. "I'm Hank," he said, tapping his chest with his fingers. "I run this little slice of heaven." I gave him a small nod, not offering my name yet. Names had weight. Names made you real. Being real could be risky. Hank's eyes flicked to my bag, just a quick glance, and back to my face. He didn't comment on it, but I could feel his eyes on me, doing the math. "Hungry?" he asked. My stomach answered before my mouth could, a low, embarrassing growl. Hank smiled like he'd heard that sound 1,000 times. "I'll take that as a yes," he said. "You want a sandwich? I've got all the fixins. Ham, beef, tuna, whatever you'd like." The word sandwich sounded like a luxury. I hesitated too long, and Hank lifted one shoulder in a half shrug. "No pressure," he said, "just offering. Mountain air turns everyone into a bottomless pit." No pressure. Again with those words. I nodded because hunger is persuasive and because he had made it feel safe to say yes. "A sandwich would be good," I admitted, "but I don't have much money." I pulled out the couple of dollars I had in my pocket and tried to hand them over. "Don't worry about it," Hank said, as if we'd solved something important. He turned, opened a small fridge behind the counter, and pulled out ingredients with the casual competence of someone who'd been feeding hikers for years. While he worked, I wandered a few steps down an aisle, pretending I was browsing. My eyes landed on a rack of beef jerky, then on peanut butter crackers, then on the cooler full of sodas. My brain did the thing it always did. Calculate. If I had X dollars, I could buy Y meals. If I bought now, I'd have less later. If I didn't buy now, I might not eat at all. I hated living like that, but I also didn't know any other way. Hank slid a wrapped sandwich across the counter toward me. "Eat it here if you want," he said. "Table by the window. You can watch the lake. Best entertainment up here." "Thanks," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I meant it to. I took the sandwich to the table he had pointed out. It was a little wobbly, sun-faded, scratched with old initials. I sat where I could see the door and the window at the same time. Another habit. Outside, the lake was a dark mirror. A man in a baseball cap cast a line and waited, still as a statue. I unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. It was simple: bread, meat, cheese, something crisp and cold like lettuce. But I was so hungry it tasted like the best thing I'd ever had. Like the first time you try a bite of pizza or chocolate. I ate too fast. I always ate too fast. Back in those days, hunger didn't trust food to stick around. Halfway through, I realized Hank was pretending to clean something near the counter, but his eyes kept drifting toward me. Not in a creepy way, in a watchful way, like he was reading the story I hadn't told him yet. When I finished, I folded the wrapper neatly. Old habit. Leave no mess, leave no trace. Don't give anyone a reason to be mad at you. I stood to throw it away, and that's when Hank spoke again. Still casual, like it was just conversation. "So," he said, "you up here camping with family?" My stomach tightened. There it was, the question. I could lie. I'd lied 1,000 times in my life. Lies were sometimes the only way to keep the world from grabbing you too hard. But Hank wasn't asking like a cop. He wasn't asking like someone itching to catch me in something. He was asking like someone who cared whether a kid had somewhere to go when the sun dropped. I swallowed. Not with family, I said. Hank didn't react. He just nodded slowly, like that answer fit into a shape he recognized. You got a tent? He asked. I shook my head. Another pause. Not heavy, just space. Hank leaned his elbows on the counter, not crossing the invisible line between us. Okay, he said softly. Here's the thing. Nights get cold up here. People think California means warm, but mountain cold will eat you alive if you're not prepared. Having lived in these mountains at one time, I knew what he was talking about. Hank's gaze steadied. I've got a little room on top of the store, he continued, like he was offering directions to a trail. It's not fancy, but it's clean, it's warm, and you can lock the door from the inside. My heartbeat started doing that fast, panicky thing, because I'd been taught, by life, by warnings, by experience, that men offering places to stay usually wanted something in return. I stepped back half a step without even meaning to. Hank noticed. He lifted his hands slightly, palms out, and his voice got firmer, but not in an angry way, in a listen to me way. Let me say this clearly, he said. You don't owe me anything. Not your story, not your time, not a damn thing. If you say no, you walk out and I don't follow you. If you say yes, you keep your bag, you lock the door, you leave whenever you want. You understand? The words hit me like a bucket of cold water, in a good way. He wasn't pretending it wasn't weird. He wasn't trying to charm me into it. He was building a boundary and handing me control. I didn't trust easily. I didn't trust almost ever. But the way he said it made my instincts quiet down. Not fully, but enough to think. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. Hank's mouth twitched like he had expected that. Because I've got a daughter, he said, his voice roughening just a little. And because if she was out here by herself, I'd pray to God someone would help her without making it worse. My throat tightened. That was a different kind of why. Not a flattering why, not a selfish why, just human. Hank pushed a key across the counter but didn't force it into my hand. If you want it, it's yours for the weekend, he said. If you don't, no hard feelings, but I can't watch a kid walk into the woods tonight without at least offering. Kid. He had said kid. Not young woman, not pretty girl, not anything that made my skin crawl. Just kid. I stared at the key. It was old, scratched, worn smooth. Safety always looked smaller than you imagine. Slowly, I reached out and picked it up. Okay, I said, and my voice shook. Just for the weekend. Hank nodded once, like we'd made an agreement. Okay, well, let's head upstairs. I'll show you. Door locks, bathroom's inside. There's blankets. You need anything from the store? You tell me. He didn't say, you can pay later. He didn't say, you can make it up to me. He didn't say anything that came with strings. He walked me outside and around the side of the building, and there were stairs that led up. The upstairs area was small, tucked into the trees like it was trying not to be noticed. One window, a little porch, the side door with a deadbolt. Hank opened it and stood to the side, letting me go in first. Inside, it smelled like pine and old quilts. There was a bed, a small couch, a little table, and a lamp. A stack of magazines and a couple of paperbacks on a shelf. Hank tapped the lock. Deadbolt here, he said. And there's a chain, too. Keys for the outside. Inside, you've got control. He looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I turned the lock myself. just to hear it click. It sounded like a door closing on fear, at least for a night. Hank gave a small smile. "All right," he said. "I'll be downstairs. Store closes at 7. If you need anything before then, come knock. If not, you rest. Mountain air knocks people out." When he left, I stood in the middle of the cabin with my bag still on my shoulder. And I didn't move for a long moment, because it felt wrong to be safe. It felt suspicious. But it also felt like something I didn't want to lose. That evening, I wandered back down to the lake as the sun dropped behind the ridges. The light turned gold, then orange, then soft purple. Shadows stretched long across the trail. The air cooled so quickly it felt like the mountain was exhaling. I sat on a rock near the shore and watched the water darken. For once, nobody was yelling. Nobody was demanding anything. Nobody knew my name. And for a runaway kid who spent too much of her life bracing for the next moment, that kind of quiet felt like the closest thing to magic. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting through the cabin window. I blinked in the sunlight and sat up too fast, heart racing. Old habit again. Like something terrible might be standing in the doorway. But it was just morning, just birds, just wind. I stepped outside and saw Hank behind the store, pouring coffee into a chipped mug like he did it every day, because he did. "Morning," he called, raising the mug slightly. "Morning," I said back, surprised at how normal it felt to answer. He studied me for a second, then nodded toward the trailhead. "You like hiking?" "Yeah," I said. "You fish?" "A little," I admitted. Hank's smile widened. "Perfect, because if you're going to hang around Crystal Lake for a weekend, you might as well do it right." That day, he took me on a trail that wrapped along the lake and climbed into the pines. He pointed out a cluster of wildflowers pushing up between the rocks. He showed me where deer sometimes came down to drink early in the morning. He told me which trees were the oldest, which bends in the trail got icy in winter, which spots had the best view if you didn't mind a steep climb. He didn't ask questions that cornered me. He didn't make jokes that turned weird. He treated me like a person who belonged on the mountain as much as anyone else. When we stopped at a lookout and the wind rushed through the canyon below, Hank rested his hands on his hips and said, "People come up here to get away from things." I stared out at the ridges, the endless layers of mountains fading into blue haze. "Do they?" I asked quietly. Hank shrugged. "Some do. Some come to find something. Either way, this place helps." Later, we fished. Hank gave me a spare rod, showed me how to cast without snapping the line into a knot. When I messed up, he didn't laugh at me. He laughed like it was part of learning. And when I finally felt the tug, sharp and sudden, I froze, panicked, eyes wide. "Easy," Hank said, calm as the lake. "You've got it. Real steady." My hand shook as I reeled in, heart pounding. The fish broke the surface, silver and flashing, water spraying in the sunlight. For a moment, I forgot everything else. I forgot the life below. I forgot the fear that lived in my bones. All I felt was the pull of the line and the wild joy of catching something real, something earned. When I landed it on the shore, Hank grinned like I'd just won a trophy. "Look at that," he said. "Weekend's already paying off." That night, we cooked a simple dinner behind the store. Fish, potatoes, something warm and filling. Hank ate slow, like someone who wasn't afraid the food would vanish. I tried to copy him, tried to eat like a normal person, but my body still rushed, still guarded. After dinner, I sat outside the store with a blanket around my shoulders, looking up at the sky. Up there, the stars didn't just appear, they showed off. a full spill of light scattered so thick it made the dark feel alive. I'd forgotten the sky could look like that. I'd forgotten there were places where the night wasn't something to fear. The next day was better, somehow, like my body was finally letting go of the tension it carried everywhere. We hiked again, we fished again. I wandered the little store aisles like I lived there, reading the silly postcards and smiling at the touristy magnets. At one point, Hank caught me staring out the window toward the lake. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. I could have lied. I could have shrugged. Instead, I nodded. "Yeah," I said, and for once, it wasn't a performance. It was true. Sunday came too fast. I packed my bag slowly, like if I took long enough, the weekend might stretch itself out and refuse to end. But the mountain doesn't stop time, no matter how badly you want it to. When I stepped outside, Hank was waiting with a paper bag in his hand. "Road food," he said, holding it out. "Sandwiches, fruit, water. Don't argue, you'll need it." I took it because arguing felt impossible with a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it with everything in me. Hank nodded like it was just what you did. Then he looked at me, really looked, like he wanted to say something that mattered. "Listen," he said, "I'm not going to ask you questions you don't want to answer. But I am going to say this. The world below the mountain can be tough. You already know that. So you be careful." "I will," I promised. Hank's voice softened. "And if you ever need to catch your breath again, you remember this place, the lake, the store. You remember there are people who will help without trying to take anything." My eyes burned. I nodded hard because if I tried to talk, I'd fall apart. I started walking toward the road, paper bag swinging lightly at my side, my chest tight with the strange ache of leaving something good. At the turnout, I stuck my thumb out again. The wind tugged at my hair. The pines swayed. The lake sat behind me, quiet and steady, like it would still be there the next time someone needed it. As I waited for a car to slow, I realized something that scared me almost as much as it comforted me. That weekend had reminded me what safe felt like. It had reminded me what normal felt like. And now, I had to carry that feeling back down the mountain, back into a world that didn't always offer it. A car approached, slowed. I tightened my grip on the paper bag and stepped toward the shoulder, thumb out, heart steady. Because I wasn't just hitchhiking down from Crystal Lake. I was taking something with me. Proof that somewhere in the middle of chaos, there could be a weekend that didn't hurt. And if that was true, then maybe, someday, something bigger could be true too. If this story brought up heavy feelings, fear, memories, or panic, you don't have to carry that alone. You can reach out right now. Call or text 988 to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the U.S. or Canada. Text the word HOME, HOME, to 741-741 to reach the crisis text line in the U.S. and Canada. If you're outside the U.S., you can find local numbers by searching Suicide Crisis Hotline in your country. You deserve support, and help is available, even if you're not sure what to say.